What's up, everyone? I'm here with NM Todd Bryant, aka StrongChess. How you doing, Todd?
I'm good, Kostya. How's it going?
Doing great. Very exciting to start this new show. I've been meaning to do this for a while, basically like this one-on-one chess training kind of thing, kind of show people how one-on-one coaching looks like. You reached out to me looking for not so much chess coaching, but just someone to kind of help you with a training plan and keep you in check. And so I
Yep.
just felt like, okay, it's a great opportunity to do the kind of do both things at once. So why don't you tell folks maybe a little bit about yourself, what your chess is at, what your goals are for the future, how are you holding up during the quarantine, whatever you want to mention.
My name is Todd. I'm a national tour. I'm currently living in Florida. I moved to Florida with my wife and three kids about a year and a half ago. Uh, and I've been playing chess for about 20 years. I became an NM in 2012. So 2012 and 2013, I was making a lot of progress, but I've somewhat stagnated over the past 5 years or so. Um, we moved to Florida a year and a half ago, and I began focusing more on chess. I had left a busy job in software in the finance industry, and so I started devoting more time to coaching and doing other chess activities. And so I'm currently trying to make a push to improve at chess because my life is sort of in a place that supports it well. So my wife and I, we both work remotely, and so we have flexible hours. And there's currently the time in my life to study chess and go to tournaments and this kind of thing. Um, so my immediate goal is simply to hit 2300 USCF. I feel like I've reached a point where chess improvement is difficult enough that I should make sort of strong incremental goals and focused on those. But in general, I'd like to hit FM and whatever could possibly come next.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, basically, this show stream is going to be kind of about just getting players to that level where they can potentially compete for norms, where you kind of have to be like 2400 FIDE strength before you're kind of like putting yourself in position. But that is a long-term prospect for many players, and I kind of like having just the long-term vision in mind. But yeah, over the course of the next couple of months or even years, like yeah, it's a lot of like incremental steps that you'll have to make. But the nice thing about like kind of shooting for the moon is that, or how did they say, you shoot for the stars, you land on the moon. You kind of just go as far as you can, and then you'll end up somewhere. And anyway, you'll be making kind of a lot of progress along the way.
Yep.
All right, good time to talk about your training plan. So we messaged a bit offline about this. Let me put it up on the stream. Okay, basically we settled on two books that you'll be working through. One for your calculation, a real classic, Perfect Your Chess. This is a book that I used personally to get from about, I think maybe 2200 FIDE or so, maybe 21 something, up to like maybe above 2300. I felt like was my strength after going through most of the problems. Tons of other players like have mentioned this book as it's like helped them specifically with their calculation. That would be the book you work on for your kind of calculation, because I mean I think players regardless of their level can almost always improve just their concrete analysis. Like you were saying, a lot of those problems, actually the difficult part is just evaluating the idea fully
Right.
and correctly, and seeing that like okay, the attacking potential is there, or the positional compensation is there.
Yeah, and that could be a little tricky because I feel like I'm a player that specializes in like tactics. The way that I've always improved at chess has just been doing thousands and thousands of tactical puzzles. But sometimes when you have to calculate in a difficult position and you're just assessing a bunch of complex lines, there's no like very clear and concrete tactics. I do feel that I struggle a little more in those types of positions.
Right, which actually brings us to how we chose your second book that you're going to be working on, this book, How Karpov Wins. I actually haven't read this book, but it sounds like it's just a collection of games. The author is Edward Mednis, is that right?
Edmar Bednes, yeah.
Got it. And we basically just felt this was a good book for you because if you're leaning more on the tactical side, I mean, I haven't seen any of your games, so I'm just going to take your word for it. And we know you're an e4 player, then a more positional e4 player I think would be perfect for you to study, and that definitely feels like Karpov would be useful for you. I mean, he played both e4 and d4 in his career, but he was a big e4 player for a while, and definitely just like a very strategic player, very methodical. There was tons of tactics in his games, but they were always kind of to justify like positional ideas and strategic goals and things like that. So that could really be useful for your chess. Basically, I just feel like you're gonna have these next couple of months where you're not going to be playing any over-the-board tournaments, and this is the perfect time to really just try to expand your chess, both on the calculation side, like in terms of stretching your ability to visualize and calculate lines and keep like more information in your head, and also on your strategic side, like your depth of understanding about the game. This is where going through annotated games is probably the most helpful thing. I would also recommend in general watching commentary by like really strong players. Like I'm a big fan of Peter Leko whenever he does commentary, because his analysis is so clean and clear, and it's just so interesting, like the kinds of moves he finds intuitive and obvious, and how he kind of goes through them. It's not the most active form of training, but just something you can do like on the side when you have time.
Cool.
Okay, so for this first episode, basically what I wanted to do with you is just a little bit of an assessment. So we're sharing this board here on chess.com.
Yep.
And so the way this will work is I'll give you a position. All the positions we go through, hopefully we can get through like 6 or 7. We'll see how we do on time. There will be some kind of clear best move or clear best idea. And I'll give you 1 minute at first to just come up with your, like, let's say best intuitive guess, just however much you can figure out in 1 minute, just to kind of test your intuition. And then after that, you'll give me your answer, and then I'll give you a full 5 minutes where you can fully think about the problem, try to calculate some lines, and justify your answer with some variations.
Okay.
And so that one will be kind of judged based on how many, let's say, important variations you see. Like if you guessed the right move, but then you didn't see like the follow-up or the defense, we'll kind of just call that like partial credit. Won't be too strict about it, but we do want you to like be as concrete as possible.
Okay, and should I just kind of think aloud during this time?
No, actually think quietly.
Okay.
I want this to feel like regular training. So basically what I'll do is once I put the position on the board, we'll start the timer. I'll mute myself in Discord so you won't be able to hear me, ideally. And then I'll discuss with the chat. We'll talk about the position kind of while you're thinking. So you should also have the stream closed so that just as fewer distractions as possible. And then I'll let you know when 1 minute is up. You can give me your first move, and then we'll go into the full 5 minute thing.
All right, sounds good.
And I should say the exercises will be kind of a mix of like some tactical, some positional. So don't feel like every problem needs to have like some kind of fancy solution. Try to treat it like a regular game and like, come up with the move that you think is best.
Got it.
Cool. Okay, so white to play, and 1 minute starting now. Okay, hopefully I'm muted, so you guys also can have 1 minute to try to come up with the best move here for white. A little bit of a messy situation, but we're just gonna start with the tough stuff. All right, Todd, 1 minute is up.
All right, so I'm pretty sure that the main idea is bishop a5.
Okay, cool. So I'll give you 5 minutes. You can try to calculate fully. Also, if you feel like you finish early, like you're fully confident in your answer, you can just let me know. You don't have to use the whole 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right. right, and time has started. So he did get the right move with bishop a5. This is indeed best. Now he just has to figure out the calculations, but that was a pretty nice find under like 1 minute on stream. He's probably like a little bit nervous, so that's pretty fast. So the idea here behind bishop a5 is that currently white's pieces are all hanging, like this queen on h3 is hanging and is kind of trapped. Bishop on c3 is kind of hanging. So if white goes knight takes f6 here, queen takes f6, then queen on h3 will still be hanging, bishop on c3 will be hanging, and white will have to give back the extra piece. Whereas if we play bishop a5, then we're basically keeping the material here. Queen takes a5, knight takes f6 check, and then the queen gets out. Or if bishop a5, bishop takes h3, we're going to have bishop takes d8, where white is kind of taking more material in the end. So yeah, definitely a good find by Todd to get bishop a5.
All right, I think I've got this one worked out.
Okay, great. All right, are we sticking with bishop a5?
Yeah, I'm almost positive bishop a5 has to be the only idea here.
Cool. Let's go through some of the lines.
Okay. So, yeah, the first thing to notice is that our queen is hanging, obviously, and so is the bishop on c3. The queen doesn't really have anywhere to go. If we try something like knight takes f6, they play queen takes f6, and we still have a problem with their queen. We have to play queen h4, but then they take our bishop on c3. Yeah, at first it took me a while to see what white could even do here, but then I looked for the counterattacking move, bishop a5, which I think is just going to emerge up a piece in every line. So there's a couple main things to calculate, and then sort of black's more desperate tries. So bishop a5, if queen takes a5, we play knight takes f6 check, king g7, and queen h4. And we're just up a piece here. We're about to play knight d5. Things look very pleasant. If bishop a5, bishop takes h3, we play bishop takes d8, and now we reach this position where both of our bishops are hanging. So, yeah, if they take our bishop with, like bishop takes d8, for example, we just play bishop takes h3 and we're up a piece. Or if bishop a5 takes h3, bishop takes d8, bishop takes g2. Here I calculated that we could throw in knight takes f6 check, king g7, and then we just take on g2. And then whichever, like if they take with either rook, we just put our knights safely on d5. So the last thing that I looked at here was like after bishop a5, if they could move their queen anywhere, or if they could play rook b6, something like that. Rook b6, we just take it, and we're still attacking their queen and threatening knight takes f6 with check. So rook b6 hasn't helped at all. Queen d6 was a weird idea that I looked at, but I think that I just take on d6, and I'm going to merge up material. And if bishop a5, queen e7, then this is where we can play knight takes f6 check and queen h4, and everything's going to be safe. I checked at the end of that line to make sure that our queen couldn't get trapped with something like g5, but we can take on h5 or go queen e4 there, and I think that that everything is good.
Cool. Yeah, very nice. You basically nailed all the key points. Let's go to the next one. This one is black to play, so I think you'll need to flip it on your end. Cool. Ready to go?
Yes, I am.
All right, 1 minute on the clock, starting. All right, 1 minute to go here. We'll see how Todd does on this one. We have a kind of thematic IQP position. And white's last move here, rook d3, actually kind of a tactical blunder. But we'll see if Todd can spot this in time. I think pretty tough to do this in 1 minute. I'll be impressed if he comes up with this one. But let me not spoil it for you guys. Let me give you a chance to think about it as well. Pawn Grubber says rook takes c4. Definitely feels like a thematic move. Absolutely. Would have to justify this one with tactics. Banyas also likes rook takes c4. Okay, let's make sure we don't run out of time. All right, Todd, 1 minute is up. Do you have a move?
Yeah, I intuitively feel that h6 looks right, but I am quite unsure about that currently.
Okay, cool. I'll give you 5 minutes on the clock. You can keep thinking. Starting now. All right, he played h6. I think it's a reasonable move. You know, if you don't have time to calculate, you know, any kind of concrete lines here, just kind of putting a question to the bishop, and then forcing white to either take on f6 or go back like bishop h4. But bishop h4 is not really what white wants to do here because they just played rook d3. Okay, knight f4 is a problem, but just strategically the bishop is kind of in the way. And white doesn't really want to back the bishop up either, then kind of loses a little bit of initiative. That said, maybe h6 bishop d2 is not so bad for white. He can continue rook g3 and then the h6 pawn could be a target. I would say it's a solid move. I mean, it's good that Todd didn't just say like some like rook c4. I mean, maybe he was guessing that this is the thing, but if he hasn't calculated it out, you know, it's probably not great to play the move. That said, it is more of an intuition test, this initial 1 minute mark, so not the biggest. It's not the biggest thing if he chooses a more intuitive move. Meanwhile, I'm going to mark down his scores. So on exercise 1, he got it correct. All right, Todd, 5 minutes is up. What will be your choice?
All right, so I was calculating h6 for a while, and I couldn't make the tactics work out. So I actually switched at the end. I was looking for a few minutes on h6 and simply couldn't make it work out. So at the end, I switched to the idea of simply playing knight takes c3, and then intending to play something like knight d5 in the future to try to relieve some of the queenside or kingside pressure. So basically the idea of h6 and why it jumped out at me is that we have this idea of potentially playing knight f4. So if we play h6, we can chase the bishop. Like if they go bishop h4, we have knight f4. And I had this idea of h6, bishop takes f6, and pawn takes f6, trying to chase the knight on e5 away from the defense of the bishop on c4, but I think that this just doesn't work out. Like if h6, bishop f6, g takes f6, they can just throw in bishop takes d5, I think. And now like checks on g3 are hanging, and if we take on e5, they can take on b7, among other things. And this looks like some kind of disaster. So I just don't think that that works out. So in the end, I chose to just play something simple, play knight takes c3, and then if rook takes c3, we can play knight d5. Just contesting that bishop on g5 and hitting the rook. We're going to try to put, you know, if bishop takes d5, we can respond. Queen takes d5, threatening mates. And we should at least have good control over the d5 square. There was one more line that I looked at around minute 3. I started looking at rook takes c4, knight takes c4, and then bishop a6. But I think that they can just play in this line b3. Although actually now I'm seeing rook takes c4, knight takes c4, bishop a6, b3. We have knight takes c3 followed by pawn to b5, which appears to be winning a piece, because they can't counterattack anything. So maybe this rook takes c4 idea is actually not so bad. Yeah, if rook takes c4, knight takes c4, bishop a6. If they play like rook g3, bishop takes c4, simply looks good. Yeah, my move was knight takes c3 here, but I think that that's probably wrong now, and rook takes c4 is correct.
Okay, that was interesting to hear your analysis. So yeah, this h6 move I think is definitely not bad, especially if you only have 1 minute for the move. I think it's quite all right. Probably the issue is that white maybe backs up like bishop d2, and then when rook g3 comes, there's all these sacrifices on h6 kind of looming. So in general, in these IQP positions, we have to be really careful about putting the pawn on h6. A lot of times we actually want to defend with g6 if we need to make a kingside move. But overall, it's a decent move. I would say knight c3 is better, so I'm glad you kind of switched to that. There were some tactics in the position, so I'm glad you were definitely calculating some stuff here. Basically, you needed to find one key idea of combining like knight c3, rook takes c4, and queen d5 here. I don't know if this one was on your radar at all.
I looked at an idea like this. I think I didn't look at this move, and I think maybe if I had looked at this line, I thought that they had knight e3, and so I rejected it, but there's queen takes g5 here.
Yeah. So basically white has to, play like rook g3 only move, and then after bishop a6, black is basically winning a lot of material here. Should have like 2 pieces for the rook, and then very comfortable situation. If rook takes c3, I think knight d5 is okay. I'm pretty sure knight e4 is a bit stronger, with idea of bishop e7 taking on c3 in between move, and then
knight c3, yeah.
Hitting everything, hitting queen with check. But knight d5, I think black is doing quite well. Okay, like we've traded off some pieces now and going to be trading off more. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, we'll jump to this position. This is white to play.
White to play. Okay.
And all right, 1 minute starting now. All right, let me flip the board here. Okay, this is white to move. Position feels close to equal. Maybe white has a little bit of an edge here, so we'll see how Todd wants to play this one. All right, Todd, got a move for us?
I intuitively want to play d6.
Okay, cool. Let's put 5 minutes on the clock, and I'll let you keep thinking about it. All right, 5 minutes starting now. Okay, so Todd went for d6. I think this is actually a little bit too early, but that's okay. I mean, intuitively, it does feel like a move we want to play. It's just that it's a little bit early. Black will go rook d8, rook f6, and just immediately kind of surround the pawn. If d6, rook d8, knight d5, black can just play rook takes d6, and it doesn't appear like white has any good tactics there. So yeah, d6 I think was a little bit too early to push, but that's okay. He only had 1 minute, so we'll see what he comes up with the full 5. Okay, Dortom says I want to kill the bishop with f4, but yeah, you know, maybe black can take this one. Maybe black just pushes e4 and just takes that space. It's not so clear. Counterspark said knight b5 followed by c4. That definitely would improve your position, like getting the pawn to c4. And Icy's Ton likes. I keep saying Icy's Ton. Icy Stun likes a4, which is also very logical, just trying to push on the queen side and try to play like a4, a5 and get a little bit of counterplay. All right, Todd, 5 minutes. Do you have another move?
Yeah, I switched my idea a lot. I think that the move that I like best now is knight a4.
Okay, what's the idea here?
Well, okay, so first of all, I wanted to push d6 to give my pieces squares, right? My queen gets the c4 square with some check, I can play knight d5, and the idea is that the d6 pawn is a dangerous passed pawn. But on further thought, I started getting concerned that black could simply play like queen d7 and queen c6, and that my pawn would actually become weak, and that his bishop would be very strong on the long diagonal. So I started wondering if I could arrange to play c4 in some way to lock down my pawn on d5. So I was looking for several minutes at knight b5, intending to play c4 next. And one thing about this move, knight b5, is that if they play a6, we can play knight d6, and next remove their bishop, and then follow up with c4 when we have a passed pawn, and it looks like things are pleasant for us. However, the problem there is that after knight b5, I think that in general they can blockade our pawn pretty easily. So after knight b5, maybe they can play queen d7, stopping this knight d6 type of ideas. And then after c4, for example, they're ready to play a6, followed by queen d6. And it's hard to see how we're ever going to chase a black piece off of that d6 square. And meanwhile, maybe white black will be making some progress, pushing his kingside pawns eventually. Like he might be able to play f4 and reroute his bishop to the kingside, and things could get unpleasant. So I had this idea of knight a4 next, and again with knight a4 we might play c4 one day, but there's also the idea that I could eventually play b3 and knight b2 to c4. So my knight will get this c4 square where it could contest this blockade. And for the time being, the knight restrains the queenside pawns from moving. There was also one trick on knight a4 that they couldn't play queen d7, which is forking the knight and the pawn on d5, because if b3, bishop takes d5, c4 wins back, wins material. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that rerouting the knight in some way and locking down the pawn on d5 for the time being is the right idea here.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, this is definitely a reasonable idea, like knight a4, knight b5, kind of with the follow-up of c4, and bringing the knight back, and you just strengthen your d-pawn. We're definitely never worse here. Did you feel like white is playing for advantage in this position?
Yes, as long as... I think that after d6, like I can fall into being much worse, but yeah, I was trying to play for an advantage because I have this passed pawn and a little extra space in the center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good you decided away from d6, because then white has potential problems with just holding on to the pawn. I would say maybe this idea of bringing the knight to c4 doesn't feel great, just because like we'll make all these moves and then black will just have to play bishop a6 there, and then can probably just take it, as long as like queen takes e5 is not possible or something like that. But the idea of putting the pawn on c4 I think definitely makes sense. The thing is about this position is that like, okay, white has this d-pawn, but basically needs a little bit more to actually push for anything, needs some kind of like additional weakness. So the best move I believe here was a4.
I see.
And just with the idea of like trying to push a5 and just create like another weakness, maybe thinking about like a6 if it makes sense to close down the bishop. But really with the main intention of just trading on b6, then maybe playing like queen b5, where it just starts to get a little bit more uncomfortable, a little bit unpleasant for black, just to hold on to this one. In the game, black played a5 in response. White put the queen on b5 immediately. Queen c7. It's kind of like principle of two weaknesses at play here, with the d-pawn kind of being one thing that black has to like take care of, and now like the b6 pawn they have to keep an eye on. And then already white was ready to just push like d6 here. queen d8. I think d7 was already possible. White chose knight d5, which is also good. Threatening to take on b6, running knight e7,
yeah.
kind of forcing black to take. Rook takes d5, and now this endgame was just like crushing for white, just because the pawn is super strong, can't be challenged really, and white's pieces just kind of dominate the whole board. So black wasn't really able to hold this one. Okay.
I see. Yeah, I didn't consider this idea of a4 at all, actually, but yeah, it looks quite nice.
Yeah, all good. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, this one is black to play.
Black to play. Okay, got it.
All right, 1 minute starting now. Okay, Banyas already with rook takes c2. Yeah, this might be kind of well-known problem, so yeah, if you've seen it before, then okay, of course it won't be too hard, but if you haven't seen the position before, then it feels like such a mess. Okay, looks like 1 minute is up. All right, Todd, 1 minute is up. Gotta move.
I do not know how to not get made.
All right, that's fine. I'll give you the full 5 minutes now. Okay, 5 minutes on the clock. I'm reasonably confident that he's gonna find the right defense here. At this point, it's kind of like process of elimination. It's very difficult to do this in under 1 minute, so I would have been impressed if he figured it out. But yeah, not a bad sign at all. Like, okay, in 1 minute he didn't find only move in this like crazy position. But with 5 minutes on the clock, I think he's going to be able to break it down. The main thing when we're defending is we want to just try to understand what the opponent's threats are and see concretely how we can deal with them. So first thing we might ask is like, what is white threatening? Okay, queen takes h6, mate in 1. What happens if we start taking stuff like a takes b3, we take the bishop, queen takes h6, we get mated, king takes g6, queen takes h6, we get mated. Eventually by process of elimination, yeah, you kind of figure out that we just have to distract some of white's pieces here, and this is kind of our only chance to save the position. Otherwise, we're just losing anyway.
All right, I think I have the idea here.
All right, what do you got?
Okay, so basically we're getting checkmated, and the only thing to stop it is this idea of rook takes c2, which is going to distract some piece that's holding things down on the king side. So we have to play rook takes c2. King takes c2 you can kind of reject quickly, because you play a takes b3 with check, and then after pawn takes we can play king takes g6, and he's just out of material after queen takes h6, king takes f7. He's actually out of checks. Or if they play, there was one more line there that I looked at with rook takes h6 check, king takes f7, and queen g5 maybe, but there we play like rook g8, and so he's just out of checks. So the main line to consider here is rook takes c2, bishop takes c2. Yeah, so this is the point of this is distracting the bishop from the defense of the f7 pawn so that our king has somewhere to. So rook takes c2, bishop takes c2. We'll play king takes g6. And now there are actually two lines to consider. There's queen takes h6 immediately, when we just play king takes f7, and everything looks very safe. But actually, I was more concerned originally about the idea of rook takes, bishop takes, king takes g6, e5 check.
Sure.
Because now the bishop comes into play, and they're going to be, well, they're attacking our knight as well, and they're going to be hitting the the g6 square once the piece comes into h6. So after e5 check, we have to play king takes f7, and the benefit here is that now we've gained a little bit of extra time. Their bishop can't come back to b3 because our pawn is still on a4. So here they can try queen takes h6, and at first this position looked a little scary, because they're kind of swarming around our king, and like f6 is still attacked. But I think in this position we can actually get away with playing just d takes e5, and if they check us on g6, for example, queen g6 check, we can play king e7, and I think that we are okay. Alternatively, if they had played bishop g6 check instead of queen g6, we can play king e7, and then if queen g7 check, I saw that we have king to d6 at the end, and we appear to be safe. So yeah, rook takes e2, like it basically has to be the idea here, but I think that black is winning after the complications.
Okay, nice. Yeah, very, very good. Like, you basically just nailed all the key points. I mean, as far as the problem goes, I think you saw pretty much all the main ideas. In a practical game, it wouldn't even be necessary to see that far, just because, like you said, everything else leads to mate. So
yeah,
you already know that rook takes c2 is kind of the only move. But it's nice that, like, okay, maybe you in a game you do have some kind of safer option, and so then you would have to really figure out whether the move is working. But yeah, essentially we just distract white's bishop for a moment away from the f7 pawn, and we can survive by taking on g6 and taking on f7. Next one is white to play. So let me know when you're ready.
White to play. I am ready.
All right, 1 minute starting now. Okay, so yeah, he definitely got there on the previous one. Yeah, like I was saying, like, okay, it's a hard position to figure out with just 1 minute on your clock, but once you have a little bit of time to break things down, then eventually you just have nothing else other than this rook takes c2. Okay, this next one is going to be a little bit more positional, not so tactical, but we'll see what Todd comes up with here, and with a little time. Material is equal. Strategically, like, it's not obvious that white is doing that much better here. Like, we have a little bit more space, but black has good minor pieces, and if black is just given enough time to bring the knight to c5, I almost made an arrow there, which would have affected Todd, then black is okay. So yeah, your intuition, guys, is pretty good on this one. All right, Todd, got a move for us?
I am pretty attracted to this idea of c5.
Okay, cool. I'll give you 5 minutes now. And time is starting. Alright, well, c5 is indeed correct. So he did figure that one out, just kind of intuitively, just not seeing anything else for white. And the idea is very logical. Yeah, if black is just given one move to play knight d7, put the knight on c5, white will basically be worse. So if we don't play c5 now, we'll basically never get a chance to play it under good conditions. And that makes it more important than any other move here. h3, rook e1, rook c1, all these moves are basically bad because it would allow knight d7. Or h3, okay, black takes on f3 first and plays knight d7. And we have, like, world's worst bishop against strong knight. So with c5, there's not really much that needs to be calculated here. B takes c5, we're just going rook c1. If knight d7, bishop to b5, putting pressure on this knight, and of course white will win back this c-pawn eventually, and then have a very nice structure at the end of that, with black having weakness on c7, weakness on a5, and yeah, just white having a long-term edge there. So nice job. I mean, maybe this is just too easy of a problem, or, you know, you guys have just learned too much chess at this point, so you figured this one out. See you later, Banihas. Thanks for participating. It is fun when there's people in the chat, you know, trying to solve the problems along with the student. C5 countered by f5. Yeah, maybe. I mean, black has to kind of do something as well.
Alright, I think I'm pretty confident in my idea here.
Okay, let's go back. Alright, sticking with c5?
Yeah, I'm gonna stay with c5. So c5 just jumps out to me positionally because my bishop wants some of those extra squares and to get on maybe the b5 square in particular, and also because it gives us the chance to wreck their pawn structure or make the pawn on d5 a strong pass pawn, right? If we can play c takes b6, c takes b6. So there's a few responses to consider. They can take immediately, so c5, b takes c5. When I was intending to play rook c3, and if knight d7 to protect their pawn, we can always play bishop b5, and we are maybe not even immediately, but eventually going to take their knight on d7 and take the pawn on c5, and we're going to have this strong pawn on d5 that gives us a space advantage, as well as have pawns to hunt on c7 and a5. So I think that this is generally pleasant. The next idea that they could play is after c5, they could respond with something like knight d7, after which I thought that we could play c takes b6, and after c takes b6, I thought that we could put a rook on the b file, maybe something like rook to b1. And I generally assess this as better for us because our bishop can get active. We can look at the weak pawn on b6, and we have a pass pawn on d5. Potentially in that line, I would want to throw in bishop b5 first to stop any sneaky knight c5 ideas, but this looked quite promising. There was one idea that I was getting concerned about, which is that they can play after c5, they can respond maybe with f5. I thought that was a tricky idea. They're trying to undermine the pawn on e4 and actually show that the d5 pawn is potentially a weakness. But after c5, f5, I had planned to play h3, taking advantage of the fact that they're bishop black squares for the time being. So if they retreat, we can take the pawn on f5. If bishop takes f3, I think that we can actually potentially take back either way, but probably we'll simply play bishop takes f3. And if c5, f5, h3, f takes e4, we can play h takes g4. And at the end of all this, I thought that black is still going to have a lot of weak pawns, and our bishop is going to become quite active on this nice long diagonal.
Okay, cool. Yeah, c5 is definitely the move we have to play here, so nice job figuring out like pretty quickly. Otherwise, knight d7, black gets, and then black is just super solid.
Exactly, yeah. If you don't play it immediately, he can play knight d7. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good that you kind of just figured out this was necessary. f5, actually, white has like a lot of ideas here. I think this move might come back to bite black because just weakening the e-pawn for good. I think maybe bishop b5 is also a nice choice here, just to get this tempo and then follow up with like knight d2. Then you might really just like kill black's play with like f3 next, and the bishop is just going to be like super misplaced. Right. Main idea you kind of just figured out, like, okay, we want to take on b6, bishop b5, rook c1, and yeah, then white is getting the structural edge. Okay, cool. Let's go to the next one here. This is white to play.
Okay.
So 1 minute on the clock, starting now. Okay, another tough one. Like I mentioned, these are, kind of a mix of tactical and positional ideas. Here, the situation is very closed. It definitely feels like a Ruy Lopez territory. Bishop takes g5. Yeah, I guess that's pretty forcing and intuitive because we can take with the queen. But probably black is going queen h6 there, and it might not be easy to find a follow-up there for white, because the bishop on e2 is the one that's kind of left on the board and very passive. We'll see. Looks like 5 seconds to go. Queen d1 from IC. What's the idea there behind queen d1? Okay, Todd, got a move?
Yeah, if I had to play a move now, I would play queen c1.
Okay, cool. Why don't you keep thinking? 5 minutes, starting now. Okay, so Todd came up with queen c1. Seems pretty similar to queen d1. Oh, you're right there, Tom. Bishop g5, fg, queen g5, queen h6, rook takes f7. Yeah, I totally blundered that. So then black has to do something else, but maybe... I'm still not seeing the threats there for white, so maybe black can play like queen d8. Just kind of try to hold on. Icy suggested queen d1, with the idea either queen h1 or queen a1. That makes sense. Possibly preparing b3, which is breaking the queen side. So basically the key to this problem is just trying to ask what the opponent wants to do. Because there's not so much active that white can do, but black actually has some nice ideas here. Number one, black wants to go rook a8 and just challenge the a file. And if we trade rooks, then we're going to be losing a lot of our potential advantage here with white, just because we won't have the pressure. And also black wants to go queen h7 and rook h8 and just fight for play on the h file. So rook a1 was suggested by Captain and Carter. Rook a1 deals with the first threat of queen h7. We can go rook h1. But the problem is rook a1, black will go rook a8 and challenge for the a file. And then if we go rook h1, the queen will just move over, and then black will be feeling much more comfortable having challenged with rook a8. So queen d1, queen c1 here are very strong. Queen e1 also makes sense with the same idea. As now with these queen moves, if queen h7, you can go queen h1, trade off the queens, and then white is going to be much better in that endgame. Or if rook a8, white can go queen a1 and secure our control over the a file, and then keeping this positional advantage on white's side. So we'll see if Todd changes his mind, but he kind of got it in the first minute, so that's pretty impressive to see. I mean, he was saying that his weakness, is kind of like positional play and figuring out what to do, but I mean, this is a very strategically, I would say, not a difficult problem, but it's a difficult one intuitively, because if we're thinking about it from the mindset of a very active and tactical player, then they're going to always want to do something super active. So b3, f4, trying to break something. But a lot of times we have to come up with ideas in chess that are just more strategic, like, okay, just stopping the opponent's idea, just neutralizing their pieces, defending against their threats. Because here white has a strategic edge, so if we can just get to some endgame where we have a dominating rook on the board, black has this weakness on the b file, then this is how white can kind of play for the initiative and keep this long-term pressure. All right, Todd, time's up. Would you like to stick with your move?
No, so I think that I want to play pawn to b3 now. So my original thought was that I was looking at the idea of sacking on g5. Sure. Bishop takes g5, fg, queen takes g5. You have to look at it like if queen h6 right away, you have rook takes f7, winning their queen. But this sacrifice felt intuitively fishy to me because we can't bring in any more pieces. So after bishop takes g5, fg, queen takes g5, if black just defends with something like rook f8, this was where I didn't see a way forward. And specifically, if we play f4, threatening f5 and trying to get the bishop into the game, then they can play queen h6, and now they're chasing our queen away, and things are starting to look quite suspicious with this sacrifice. So I'm not so sure that bishop takes g5 works at all, and I don't think that rook f8 is necessarily even the only way for them to defend in that position. So the big problem that we have here, so I should say that the queen c1, the idea was to maybe play queen a1 and try to infiltrate with my queen somehow. But the big problem with the position is that our bishop on e2 is a very useless piece. It's currently really restricted. So the idea of b3 is just to sort of break the bishop out of its cage and get pressure on c4 and b5. And potentially this bishop could become very strong. Like if it lands on b5, it has like bishop d7, bishop b6, and it can get into the game this way. So after b3, there are a couple of ideas to consider. The main one is if they just take it, c takes b3. The idea is that we can recoup that pawn patiently, we can play queen b2, which was the main thing that I had looked at, and next we're taking on b3. We also have rook a3 to pick up the pawn as well. After b3, c takes queen b2, I was looking at b4, trying to make it difficult for us to recapture the pawn. So I was leaning toward b3, c takes rook a3, because then after b4, the b4 square is still protected, so we can take and then snatch the b pawn later. But I definitely think this is the right idea, and like black does not really have anything active to do. Like his knight on f7 is still really bad. Like his pieces generally lack squares. So I think that this will be good for us.
Okay, I mean, so what you said definitely makes sense. Like we do want to play for this move b3 eventually. This was a pretty tough one, so I was just curious to see how you would do on this one. Because the thing is that black actually does have a couple of ideas here. Number one is to try to play maybe rook a8, and because black is definitely worse. This is kind of like typical like Spanish torture. White just has this like space advantage, and it's very solid, so it's hard to break through, but black is passive. So if black can try to fight for the a file and exchange rooks and put the queen on a8, it'd be kind of hard for white to do a whole lot there. Black's other idea is to play queen h7 or queen h6 and bring the rook to h8.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
And so this is the problem with b3, is that like queen h7, rook h8, and white is not really in time to defend against this. So actually, somewhat.
Can I play like queen h7? Can I respond to king f2 maybe? Or no, I guess you have queen h2 check right away.
Yeah. Good. So actually, your first idea was 100% correct. Queen c1. I mean, it was kind of just like an intuitive guess, because I mean, you mentioned you wanted to put the queen on a1, but it actually deals with both of black's threats. If black goes rook a8, you go queen a1, you keep the a file, you keep the advantage. And if queen h7, then we're playing queen h1, and this endgame will be a lot easier for white to grind, basically. Because now, you don't have to worry about any counterplay. You can play like bishop d1, b3, you can bring the king to c2 and play b3, and then you have this like long-term edge that's now like basically for free. So okay, that happens sometimes. Like you guess the move, but then you you change your mind later on. Cool. All right. Well, so I gotta kind of wrap up here, but overall, I think you did well. I felt like positionally you're not as lacking as you kind of said you were. Like I feel like your positional intuition is definitely there. But okay, I also don't like to make too many judgments just based on like very little time, working with someone. So I don't want to say like too much like, oh, this is your problem or anything like that. Right. Okay, but basically we'll be wrapping up here. We'll try to do another couple training sessions in the next few weeks.
Okay.
If you play any classical games from now until next time, then it would be great if you can like annotate some of them, and we might be able to go over some of them on the stream as well.
Okay, I can do that.
And well, mainly, we went over your plan. It's I'll put it up on the stream again. You have some books to work through. We are sharing this Google Doc just for like accountability. So your main assignment is to just try to solve 6 problems per day in the Perfect Your Chess book. Try to go through 1 game per day in the Karpov book. You can always do more if you feel like it, but I think 1 game is already kind of like good. It's just a baseline.
Yeah, just one question that I had was I'm always unsure when reading through games collections of how quickly to go through the game. Like if you try to guess every move, it's like torture and takes 2 hours or something. But it also feels like it's easy to just breeze through the game and not really get a good understanding of what's going on. Do you have any advice on how to study these games effectively?
Yeah, I'm super glad you asked. Basically, I'm not a huge fan of guess the move because I just feel like during the game we're never guessing the move. We're just coming up with ideas and then trying to like justify them. So what I always try to do when going through games is, you play through the moves, you read the notes and the variations. I try to visualize the variations just to work on visualization. But then if they talk about some line like, okay, in case of this move, this, and this, and then if their annotation at the end doesn't make sense to me, like I'm not visualizing the position properly, or I just don't understand, like, oh, and the two pieces are hanging, and I'm like, what's hanging? I don't get it. Then I'll play out the moves and try to like understand by putting everything on the board. But mainly we're just looking for moments that you find like instructive, moves that you feel like, oh, I would have never come up with that, or that seems so counterintuitive to me. And then you're just trying to understand the player's mindset as to like what their idea was, and specifically kind of like what were the lines that they calculated in order to justify this idea and making this work. So yeah, if they play like some weird move, it feels like anti-positional, or they made some exchange you wouldn't have made, you kind of want to keep your brain like working and just like kind of keep that questioning going, like, okay, would I have played this? Why not? What don't I like about this? And then you're just trying to kind of match your perspective with, in this case, Karpov, just to see like, okay, how he approached the game, what kind of ideas he came up with, and then specifically what variations he had to calculate during the game to make his thought process work.
Right.
And then one of the biggest things I always try to do is I just try to visualize the variations as if it was me playing the game. Like if I was Karpov, I had this position, I'm calculating some sack or some positional idea, and then I'm like, okay, well, I would have had to see this line, that this is weak at the end, and just kind of get that feeling for what it would feel like.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, I got to wrap up, but thanks, Todd, for doing this. I hope you found it useful.
Yeah, this was very enjoyable. Thanks, Kostya.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, we'll be wrapping up the stream